Hey, everybody, welcome to our second episode on credit scoring. And today we are going to talk about the components of a credit score. And I had the opportunity to read through some of the notes ahead on this. This is really fascinating information. So even if you have to just listen to it while you're driving or something, be sure to listen to what Bruce has to share. So go ahead, Bruce.
All right. So last week we talked about how to define a credit score. And it's critical to understand the definition of a credit score just as much as it's important to understand what those components are. Because if you don't know the areas that are making up your credit score, you can't possibly impact them and influence them. And so it's important to start off with the range. You can find this online just as easily if you Google it, but a credit score range is anywhere from 300 to 850. That's not dollars, it's just a point system. And each one of the credit bureaus has their own calculation, but we'll talk more about that in detail. But let's talk about that. Generally speaking, they all agreed to these five components of the credit score. The largest chunk, 35% of your total score, which is 298 points, is your credit history. As I said last week, the definition of a credit score is um, a model that is predicting the likelihood you'll pay your bills in time in the future based upon how you've paid your bills in the past. So, of course, the largest chunk will determine your credit score, and that largest chunk is 298 points. So we've got to get this right. If you've gotten it wrong in the past, can't do anything about it. We're going to teach you some skills that you can do to improve it for the future, but it's important to understand that's the largest chunk. The next largest chunk, which I think is the most important chunk because every consumer can influence this, can control this. You have absolute control where over time you can get 100% of these points in your favor. And that is 30% of your total score or 255 points. The credit bureaus say how much debt you owe. It's a misnomer. It's not whether you have $200 million in a mortgage or a $50,000 car loan. It is about revolving credit, or that's the technical term, but in layman's term, credit card debt. And it isn't do you owe $100,000 to a credit card or do you owe $300? I know people who have a $300 credit limit and have terrible scores because they're mismanaging this aspect of it. And we're going to teach absolutely how to take control of this and in a short period of time, how to capture most of these 255 points. The third category, 15% or 128 points, is the length of your credit history. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this one because it's obvious. If you just started opening up credit in your name a year ago, you're going to have less of these 128 points than if someone has had credit in their name for the last 25 years. Can't do much about that, but I call that the hurry up and wait model. We need to hurry up and get your credit started so that you can get farther along in this process. The fourth category and the fifth category all have the exact same weight. The fourth category, or 10% of your total score, which is 85 points, is who looks at your credit or your credit inquiries. We've all heard you need to limit who looks at your credit. And we're going to talk about some of the myths and misnomers associated with this because there are plenty, and it comes up in my class all the time what people think about this particular category. But I'm going to give you very specific rules and guidelines to follow so that you don't abuse this part of the rule and you still get all of those 85 points. And then the same exact 10% or 85 points is what's referred to as the credit mix. In a perfect world, they want you to have mortgages and installment loans like car loans or student loans, credit cards, and even what they call finance company loans. So, but I always tell people bunk or BS, get what you want to live your life. And if you don't want a mortgage, don't get a mortgage to build credit because there's other ways to have good credit without a mortgage. There's other ways to have good credit without an installment loan. But those are the five categories that make up the potential 850 points. You're never going to get all 850. What we want to do is get you the most that you can get out of the 850. And that's what the individual next episodes will be about, breaking down those components and what you can do to impact that.
Fantastic. I never knew there were that many pieces to that puzzle. So be sure to join us next week and we will have more great information for you. Everybody take care.